Dave Brennan here with Mark's Basement Arcade. Well, Mark is working the camera, but I am working with Mark, helping out with some board work on this solar fire, and there's a couple of hacked connectors where people had soldered some wires directly to the board, and so before I pull the boards out to take them for some work, might as well take the opportunity to show how to replace a connector. It's common on these old 80s games that you're likely going to have to replace a lot of connectors, so knowing how to crimp on new pins and put in new connector housings is a must for older pinball machine repair. So real quick, I can show you the back glass out, and in the back here there's a couple. One, I need to put a quick a connector here. This is for the power board. There's a couple of wire nuts that are making this work, but it doesn't look very nice. Same thing over here on this connector. You got it must have burnt up or something broke on this. They must have pulled out and they didn't know how to put them back in. So these are all IDC connectors, which are insulation displacement connector. So what I'm going to do is crimp on some Molex pins and convert this over to a Molex plug. And so what we'll do then is we could probably zoom in a little bit more to show some detail, but let me grab some tools and we'll get at it. Alright, so I'm going to start with the power board connector, because that's a pretty easy one to do. These are, you can get male, female versions of these connector plugs. I think this is a .06 something. Let me look. I think it's 95. 0.92. Anyway, so they're keyed because it's a shape that you can't screw up. So you have that, and then I have male and female pins, and you can get so these crimpers are a ratcheting one. I'm sure Mark has shown these before, but essentially it's a set of dies, and on the inside you have a higher point and a lower point to the crimp. And so there's two dies in here. One is larger than the other. So if you have, for example, what you're going to do mostly for connectors on the board, you're going to have so there's a really small 0.1 connectors.
Takes a little bit. There we go.
Really small 0.1 connectors, and that's the smaller die. And then the larger one is is it 0.06 or 0.156 or something like that? Come on, this way. Yeah, there we go. And so there's different. So this is like a regular style. See how it's smooth on this? There's another version that is called a Truficon, which I like. There we go. And see, it has this like kind of fins on the ends. So when you slide the connector onto onto the board, it's getting 3 points of contact onto the pins. So if you're ever doing something that is more on a power board and higher power going through it, then it's a good idea to use those. But in the case of this connector, I'm using, these are rounded pins. You see them a lot on cables like this. So it's good to have an assortment of them. Some are typically, it's like 0.0062 is a smaller version, and then 0.93 is the larger. So those are typically what you'll find, and you can get them from Great Plains Electronics. Another place that I go to a lot is Tata Electronics, and they have quite a few different connectors that you can do. Anyway, so back to this. What I like to do is you put the female end in, I guess it would be, you got one that's an open end and one that's a closed end. Let me go back. And so I put the female end in this closed, because that's basically, when you look at these connectors, you can kind of see how that works. You got the male pins on the open, female on the closed, and it just kind of marries them up better. So let me just take them off here. Doesn't really matter which way you do it. So this is a thicker gauge wire anyway going in here. So when you do this, let me grab some strips. When you do this, you don't need a ton of extra wire exposed. Probably need like 1/8 of an inch is good. And like I was saying, when you go to crimp these, that way, sorry, this way. You go to crimp these, see how it has a large end and a smaller end. The large end is part of the die in the larger part of the die, so that crimps onto the insulation of the wire, where the smaller end crimps onto the wire itself, the stripped end. So you just kind of line it up into your die, and this is a right-handed tool, so the larger end is always facing me. And you just kind of poke the wire into it, and it's best if you can see the other end, see that you're crimping it good, and then I just crimp it down. That's it. And then I'll take one end of this, feed it in, and it just snaps in place, and then I'll do the same on this side. If you ever have these are just cheap wire strippers from Harbor Freight, but if they ever stop snipping very well, it's this screw on the end that you need to tighten up. Alright, one more female on this side. You look through and make sure that you're crimping the wire on the other side. So, and it's good if you're just getting into learning how to crimp these. Take your time, make sure you get it right. There are cheaper crimpers that don't crimp both ends at the same time, and I'm not a fan of those because it doesn't give, because you have to crimp one side and then the next, so it takes a lot more time, doesn't give you even pressure, and it's easier to screw up. I'd rather use the right tool for the job and you get it right the first time, because if you don't get a good crimp on whenever you're doing these wires, you could end up chasing your tail with more problems that you caused because you didn't get a good connection. So there's the one side. Now I need to do the male ends. So same kind of thing, but these have that way. These have so what locks into the connectors, you can see those fins here, and so this is the male version of it. So again, I'm going to trim this off. You only need about 1/8 of an inch of the stripped wire. Do that to both. Okay. And they do make on these as well the fins for it. This way. Focus. Maybe. Is it gonna focus? There we go. The fins on it, you can get different size, and that's for the gauge of wire. So when you're ordering these, you can pay attention to what you have. I think typically it's 22 gauge, I believe, for most pinball, but you might have stuff that's a lower gauge. So I'm doing the die set actually on this says 18 to 22 and then 24 to 30. So and I'm sure I can look up if you're interested in getting some tools. I think I have this. I have the links for this. I'll post them in the description for the video. That's it. Then I snap these in. This is AC power, so it doesn't really matter which, as long as I'm doing the two ends. Snap in place. There we go. Come on. Line that up. Now I have a quick disconnect for this bag out of here instead of these wire nuts. That part is done. So now I'm going to move on to this one, but what I can't see is there are two orange, it looks like orange with a purple stripe and orange with a green stripe, and I can see that they're going onto this connector, because here's the rest of the orange with the color stripes, but I don't know exactly what positions they go in. So these wires that they soldered onto the back of the board here, they're going to tell me which place that they go to. So I'm going to take off all these connectors, I'm going to remove the boards, and then I can see that. But before I remove any connectors, let's always a good idea to take good pictures. So I'll just go along. So these do have keys to them, but I can already see, for example, this one at the top, I can see that it does not, it's not using the last pin. So let me see here. Oh, yeah. So this, for example, does not have a key. And so you could screw this up and plug it in any which way that you think that it goes, and you could end up making a mistake. So always take good pictures of connectors before you remove them from the board, because what I'll probably end up doing is replacing all of these connectors and putting in keys where they need to go. You could end up causing a lot of problems if you don't do it right. Looks like all of them are like that. They're missing, looks like they did an 8-pin connector instead of, they did it all the way around. They did an 8-pin connector instead of a 9. And then, sorry if I'm in the way of the camera here. Make sure I get all these wires. Oh, I'll do the MPU too. So yeah, that is a bad thing. You want all of your connectors to be keyed, because especially on this game, these are all 9 pins, and so if you don't have a key, you could easily plug it into the wrong spot and cause some problems. So hopefully that wasn't a factory thing, but it could have been. Maybe they ran out of 9-pin connectors and, well, let's just use 8. But that was not a smart move on their part. At the very least, I would have put a key, so you can see that there's a pin missing from this. I would have put a key there, basically a plug in the end of the connector. And if you don't, you can order keys from Great Plains Electronics and for the different size connectors. But in a pinch, you can use a toothpick. You can shove it in the end, and at least it gives you some indicator that that you have a reference point. So yeah, it's very weird that they don't have keys on here. Yeah, they're all like that. Huh. Weird. I wonder if it's something to do with like the era of this, because I think this is a System 7 Williams, and I think they were moving to the System 9 probably not long after this. I'd have to look back at the history. Sorry if my head's in the way. I want to make sure I'm grabbing a hold of the plug so I'm not yanking out any wires. Yeah, the MPU is good. That one is keyed right. So MPU at the top, and then driver board in the bottom here. Alright. So with Williams, they did this very not so super smart thing, is they did this interconnect board, or connector, this giant 40-pin connector, right in the middle. And that one, it typically has problems because it loses connection, and then it can't communicate with the driver board. And so I'll show you when I get to the board repair on the bench that you always want to replace that. Typically you can get away with leaving the male pins, but you definitely want to replace the female because it loses the tension on the pins, and you can't, if they can't communicate, then the game's not going to work. So always a good idea. Otherwise you'll be chasing your tail with all kinds of problems if you don't do that. Luckily we know that this game works, so all the stuff that I'm going to do to the board should not impact its functionality. So when we pop it back in, it should go, because I'm not planning to mess with too much of it. Oh, I'm missing a couple screws here. One at the bottom. And Williams always had this, there's like a metal, behind here there's like a metal shelf that the MPU sits on. Kind of a weird way of doing it, but get them all? I think I got them. There we go. Okay.
Get those 2 wire nuts down.
Right, I do. So, what I'm looking for are these. I can take this off. Separate these 2 boards quick. There. So, see, they're just long connectors that go through it. So these are actually longer. So if you were to replace these, you got to take note. These pins are actually longer than your header pins for the rest of the connectors. So you'll have to order the right thing, and I believe Great Plains has these. So if you're wanting to replace the male ones, you got to get the right ones. So okay, driver board. So I can see they kind of marked them here, and it's these last, looks like the last 2 pins. 1, 2 here. So looks like the bottommost one. Getting all twisted up here. Alright, the bottommost one is the orange with purple. So looking at the connector, see, that's weird. Because they have, that can't be right. Because they have 3 spaces in the connector that are missing, but one of which is the key, and according to this, they're saying that the last 2 are the ones that you're connecting to. That's not right. Let's see here. This has something to do with the key. Ah, okay. Alright. So, remember, there was like a pin missing from each. I wonder for what position was that? Good thing I took pictures. That was the top one. Okay. So the bottom one doesn't have anything. And then this went like this. Okay. So that means that the very bottom one is the key. So that's what they're saying there. Oh. Huh.
Let me stop it for a minute.
Sure. Looking at this, something is not right. So I'm going to have to dig through the schematic a little more. But essentially, the wire colors should go on this connector, but they're not. The ones that are wire nutted. They moved it down and actually put it on this one because it's belonging to the last 2 pins on this connector, which logic would say that that's not correct. It should go to this one. So I'm going to have to dig into it and see what it's supposed to be. So in the meantime, so I can take this off and work on it, I'm going to just put a little piece of tape on one of these so I know which one is which. How they currently have it, just mark one of the wires because I know that I'm only working with 2 to the bottom one. So that way the tape goes to the tape. At least I have it marked. Okay, now I can unwire nut this. Alright, it's free now. But yeah, that's a mystery that I'm going to have to solve as I'm going through this. And then I can replace that connector and fix it right. So, alright, with that, I think we'll end the video and I'll see you back at the soldering desk.